Morning again, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask you to take your seats, as you know, desperately trying to keep to the agenda, if I can. So we've got an exciting second half of the morning. Up next is a plenary discussion, and I'm delighted to thank Argaam, I know, who have been thanked by my chairman for being such an amazing team, and you'll appreciate organising events isn't easy, as we're seeing today, but you can only organise successful events when you've got great partners, and Argaam are certainly that among many other wonderful partners we have. So it's my pleasure to introduce the IR Best Practice discussion, which will feature a number of companies from Saudi Arabia, and they're going to be led by Mohamed Abdelhamid, who is a business reporter. So I can't think of anyone better than to take us through this next discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, John, for the introduction. And thanks for being here and sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the conference and will enjoy the rest. I'm absolutely delighted to moderate this panel with our distinguished experts and speakers. We're going to talk about today the best practice of IR. I'll just quickly introduce our speaker from my right, Fadi Al-Qutub, who's a Chief Investment Officer at Saudi Re Insurance Company. It's a Saudi stock joint company as the first reinsurance company established in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Fadi held several positions in the field of investment and portfolio management for more than 20 years. Welcome, Fadi. Next to him is Mr. Mohamed Abdelhamid, who's the head of investor relations at the United Electronic Company, Extra. Under his supervision, Extra was ordered in 2019 as the best improved corporate for investor relations in the Middle East. And last but not least, Fahad Alothman, who's the Director of Treasury and Investment Department at Maharah. He has a record of experience in the banking sector and both corporate and risk sector. Welcome, Fahad. First of all, I would like to start with you, Mr. Mohammed, about how relatively the IR department started in Saudi. It started like 2018, the CMA pushed the company and encouraged them to start the department in part of the more disclosure and to give encourage more investors to invest in the company. Can you talk about the rapid change? What has changed from the beginning until now?
Well, thanks, Mohammed, for that question. Honestly speaking, that created a good memory for me because I started this journey with my company and even with in the IR field late in 2016, which was by that time there was no real framework. Let me put it that way. Which the IR was completely personal initiatives that led by some companies, given some factors. But during our journey from 2016, passing by inclusion of the Saudi market within MSCI and even FTSE, and it's really good to see the Saudi capital market is basically the only market in the whole world to have the inclusion for both indices basically in a frame time of almost 12 months. which is completely turned the situation for us as an IROs talking to the international investors. So that created a good development, that created a good evolvement. Some guidance has released by the regulator. A good IR toolkit published by Tadawul. Even MEIRA started to promote for the certificates and the workshop that really promotes the concept of IROs. I was one of the people who got the certificate of investor relations from MEIRA in 2018, and it opened really the door for us as an investor relations officer to shape up the situation with our companies across the different sectors. So it was really a good journey to have it with now most of us are talking international. We are as a capital market led by the regulator offering, let me call it a top-notch investor relations services to our international players.
Thanks, Mr. Fadi. You have an experience in the investment side, on the buy side. Can you talk about, like, was there any challenges and issues that you have faced during your past career?
Definitely. The development that took place in the field of investor relations, I've been involved in the Saudi market, especially in the investment side, on the buy side, since 2004. And where do you see where it used to be, where it is today, is a major advancement. Definitely a number of initiatives by the regulation, by the regulators. I would say even the leaders in the market itself of certain blue chip companies who have adopted international practices before even the inclusion in the emerging market indices and so forth. But the emerging markets definitely put the spotlight for all to live up to that standards, and definitely when the regulator and the stock market issued the guidances in terms of what are those needs to be adopted, it has been major. Before, it was a troublestaking to set up an appointment with a listed company in order to have a Q&A session. Whom do we contact? Whom do you know? You always depended upon interpersonal relations, networking and so forth. Today, no, that isn't there. Today, you can easily click on the Tadawul website, go to the profile of the company if you don't know, or go to the website of the company itself, and you definitely have, an investor relation contact that you can always establish through by contacting them directly, putting forward your requests, and you'll have a proactive, reply from that. Coming from that side, understanding the challenges and so forth, this is one of the key things that promoted, I think, the industry to adopt more and more of the international standards of IR and communicating, and how that releases value to the stakeholders, whether they are the shareholders or other stakeholders who need to understand and know more about the company and would like to have that dialogue, I would say, to take place. But by far, it has transformed, I would say, almost 180 degrees. Yes, there will always be areas of development and progress and so forth, because, it is the sky is not the limit. It's always open for everybody to progress from there.
Great. Fahad, how do you see the IR since it has started?
I think from the point of view of challenges, about the challenges, I think the main struggle that can be faced is transferring the concept of the IR as a part of the corporate strategy of a company. Transferring this and convincing the company to adapt the investor relation as a part of the corporate strategy was the main, let's say, struggle that I've been facing as Fahad, or from my, let's say, the peers companies. Because, let's say, hosting such, let's say, department and starting to have this is the formal communication is something that can be struggled by so many companies. And we have seen this maybe, and we have been seen this in the recent years, especially during the COVID. It has been like forced to establish these channels through the investor relation, to transfer and to clarify the messages that the company want to share it with the investors.
Very well. So you mentioned COVID-19. I'll get back to you, Mohammed, about COVID. When COVID hit the market, how your team dealt and communicate with the investors?
Look, basically, I personally, and I think most of the investor relations professionals in the Middle East and even in the world, have learned a lot from COVID, because again, we used to hear about crisis management, but we never lived the crisis. Okay, so it was a complete different situation for all of us, that we need to be available all the time, internal and external, to understand what's happening on the ground and translate this into a communication, to be open for feedback. And because again, it was a period of a complete uncertainties. Nobody was aware of what will happen tomorrow, or even not even tomorrow, in the next hour. We are talking about everyone was putting his assumption. It was a complete speculations by everyone that really drive the markets across the globe very negatively. So as an IR, I started to be active, to understand what's happening, what have the management done on the ground for the company, and I started to translate this. And I will tell you something very strange. Everyone was putting an assumption in the COVID times that sector like consumer sector will completely collapse, as we are relying on 70% importation from China. So China now is on lockdown. So we need to understand what will happen. And the management was clever enough to read this at early stages when we started to witness some closures and some lockdowns happening in China. We started to have like an inventory pileup that has been translated into a success within the lockdown for the country. We were passing this to the investors, as they cannot see it as we can see it. We were ready, even with the fundamental business. Again, reiterating the fundamentals of your business was very important by that time, because again, everyone knows that COVID times, either it's long or short, it will pass. And the stronger business will be the most sustainable and the most business relying on fundamentals properly. So that was the situation. The most important thing I have learned, and it was really notable, and it was really considered by the investors, is being transparent. Pass the right information as it is. If it's bad, you need to pass it. You need to be available to pass it, and you cannot hide. And you need to respond, and you need to, in the same time, open for more feedback, because that time was very challenging for everyone, even the buy side and its sell side, and even us as a corporate.
I think one of the main issue at that time was the storytelling. Given that there is uncertainty about the lockdown and when the international flight will be back, that gives the struggle from the company point of view to get, because if there is no uncertainty, I cannot give the new norm and what will happen now after the new shape and after the changes and some regulation has been applied. So I think the storytelling was a big lesson to be learned, and how it can be delivered to the investors properly, and at the same time with the full transparency.
Fadi, what kind of action have you taken during the COVID pandemic?
Mainly for us, because we were in the financial industry, mainly in the insurance and reinsurance, the most important thing was working very closely with the regulator and working within that framework of communication and making sure that the most important thing is the business continuity but in the field of making sure everybody is safe and is working within, I would say, adjusted environments, but to ensure that there is continuity of business in light of whatever information was being provided at that of time, and to make sure there is no disruption. The most important and the most critical thing was disruption due to the business or to the individuals in any sort or any form. Our company worked within that, created a full BCP team, business continuity plan team. Communication was given out across within internally, which was also very critical because, you know, you communicate also internally as well as externally. And as my friend said, definitely continually communicating to the shareholders, investors, because they were also very concerned about, was there any disruptions? Were you going to be affected negatively? Is this short-term or long-term disruptions and so forth? And we were always assessing this as we continued and communicating in light of what information that we had, but in the same time, making sure it's being evaluated in terms of how will that be impactful, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you can always take that piece of information and get misinterpreted. But no, we want to make sure that the right piece of information is being communicated, and how does that translate to the person that we are communicating to, or to that community that we are communicating to. So we made sure we had that transparent even when we were, everybody was there during at that time. We even had investor conferences, but they were all online even at that time. So definitely the first couple of questions was about business community, disruptions and so forth, and what are your effects. And we were always addressing that from the senior management of our MD, CEO, and so forth, all the way to all the management or the staff that we had in the company.
Mohamed, did you develop any kind of communication, let's say from a website or an application or a hotline through the phone, to get any kind of concern from the investors?
I think from an IR toolkit, it was prepared by us as an investor relations function in the company, but that toolkit really developed in a different manner that facilitate the purpose of the time, which is nobody thought about having a continuous 7-8 meetings while you are sitting at your home. So that created a new norm of having the IR communication within the investment community. We really developed, let me put it this way, more details across different functions. Again, I'm talking about very condensed investor relation presentation. We used to have it pre-COVID, but it was more condensed, talking about more business perspective in COVID times, highlighting maybe some points was negligible pre-COVID, but it was very important through COVID. The IR, the annual report as well, the website was available as a number one tool for us as a company. We had this almost since we go public in 2012. We had our IR page, but we developed it a lot in that time. So it was like a new norm of managing the IR toolkit we have it pre-COVID. This is how can I see it?
Fadi, if we're going to talk about the Saudi exchange and the CMA initiative to support the IR department, despite there's like some, let's say, challenges still you're facing as an IR team, how do you see that?
Definitely, in terms of the regulator, it creates the framework. It creates the boundaries in which, in order to ensure that you have a leveled playground for everybody to come in and build best practices across industries. Today you are talking about peak pillars in the market from the big blue chips of companies who deal internationally, understands, adopts, and does everything, all the way to the small cap companies and so forth, who also wants to adopt the best practices of the IR and so forth. I think today with putting out the guidelines in terms of the sustainability and so forth creates that initial, I would say, guidance for companies to go ahead and adopt best practices and develop the IR role itself, because at the end of the day, we will end up learning from each other. We will end up adopting best practices and coming out with our own theme, let's say. Each market is very unique. Each market has its own way of conducting such things. The Saudi market is very unique, I would say, in the region of even the MENA itself, because of the fast-track growth, the inclusion, as my colleague said, into the international emerging markets and so forth. And where you see the standards and the regulation puts it much in the forefront. It's a matter of now the individual participants to come in and adopt across industries. As we sit here, even across the panel, we represent that, initial diversity. But if you look at that market, you have that huge diversity in various sectors, and how each sector adopts the IR role, how does it develop it. But definitely, one thing we all agree upon, it is a critical role. It is part that should be included within the strategy and the framework of a company. It's just how to take it to the next level. Each company has to adopt that on their own.
Again, I might throw out a question to you. Is it the right time to be forced at a level where the companies must have it as a part of their structure? Given that the importance of it, we have seen our, let's say, targets for 2030, definitely to increase the foreign investors and to have let's say, a bigger exposure than what we are having now.
I would agree, yes. Once you become a public listed company, today you will have to deal with public investors. You definitely have to create that role, create that responsibility, give it the full spectrum of policies, procedures, how to deal with it, how to communicate. Because at the end of the day, it becomes an integral part, like any other business support unit for the company. And here we're talking about one of the most critical ones, which is the shareholders and the stakeholders. And that's why these are the ones that we need to really focus upon. And I think today you will find most of the companies, a lot of them, gets heavily involved from the top all the way into the investor relations, and it moves across all the way to to any staff. Whoever their role is, they represent that company, and they end up presenting it to the shareholders at the end of the day.
Mohamed, if we can ask about the quantity and the quality of disclosure. Are investors happy with the kind of disclosure that we see in the market?
It's a very tricky question, honestly speaking. Look, there is no destination. Let me put it this way. In a 5 years' time, we have been evolved from a market to a very fast and very dynamic market. So we adapted, our regulator is very active, and in the same time, the regulator is giving us the guidelines to do and to what to do. However, when it comes to the companies, according to the sector, you need to identify the good level of disclosures that facilitate your investors to take the right decision. Okay, it's not about financial or earning release. Let me put it this way: with the earning release, you just scratch the surface. The data that being processed by the buy side and even sell side is completely humongous. They need to have the right decision in a good time to get their investment very effective. So you need to deal with the right type of disclosure. However, there is no destination, as I told you. All the time we will be evolving. If the regulator introduced an index that really cater for something or cater for some initiatives like the ESG indices, all of that type of indices that really needs a special required disclosures. All of the companies will come to report that type of disclosures. But I can see a good development happening, and we are going into the right direction. Because again, listening to the feedback coming from the investment community is much important to assess if you are disclosing rightly or not. And in the same time, look, there is a very thin line between having a good disclosure and having it in a regulatory framework. I think from my opinion, the regulator is giving us a good platform to promote our disclosures, and they are all the time active about the type and the level of disclosures, and they are adapting with the market evolving. So I can see it this way.
I'd like to hear your opinion. I'll start from Fahad. The level of disclosure doesn't need to be more developed in the markets or not? The level of disclosure.
Yeah,
Comparing, if you compare the level of disclosure in the emerging market for the Saudi market, do you see it doesn't need to be more developed or not?
Definitely, the storytelling for the investors, one of the essential factors they are considering to take such a decision, for example, to capture whatever opportunity in such a company, is the level of disclosure, not just the financial, even for the non-financial. If we go back to the Corona time, there are some news or let's say events happen to whatever company. Sometimes the disclosure is not just stating the fact. You need to go further. What action plans that the company might do? 1, 2, what is the impact? So this type of disclosure will definitely be very sensitive topic for whoever going to present it. So sometimes, or most, let's say, sometimes most of the company might try to not give the impact, what will be happening throughout this event. So this disclosure sometimes must, or let's say most of the companies, they wouldn't give the impact of it. So this is the question: is this a type of disclosure that the investors would like to know, or should we just stating the fact without stating what other impact that might happen from such an event?
What about you, Fadi?
Similarly, and definitely it's about what you disclose, because end of the day, and how do you disclose it, because you can say the message, but the way you say it might deviate definitely the norm. And I think today, where we are in terms of how Saudi is disclosing and talking about information, and definitely, we take an example of the COVID and how we held it and handled it in terms of company disclosures is a clear example, but also a number of events, corporate events that take place. A lot of the companies are handling, on whether positive or on the negative side, and how they communicate that is going to create the effectiveness of that communication and the role of the IR in passing that message in the right frame that it should be passed on to the investors.
So Vision 2030 now is playing a huge role to attract more investor relations. From your point of view, how do you see how do you communicate with foreign investors to attract them to invest in the Saudi market?
Definitely for us, we operate on an international level because being a reinsurance company, we deal on international level with all stakeholders, clients, investors, and so forth. But definitely, if we focus on the investor side, proactively participating into any activity, forum, and so forth, where we are able to create that environment, but also very importantly is also facilitating the direct channels of communication and with the investors and the shareholders. Give you an example. In the end of 2021, we worked with me and my colleagues in the investor relations. We found out that there isn't much forums happening. So we said, okay, why we should wait for a forum to happen? Let's go out and create our own forum. We worked with an asset manager or investment company. We walked out and we created an investor 2 to 3 days where we invited potential shareholders, existing shareholders, to come across and have one-to-one sessions and talk to us. So if the sessions don't happen or the communications don't happen, don't wait for it. Create it from the side of the company. Create your investor days, create your investor communications, earning calls and so forth. But even if not those things, create an event that will bring your investors maybe a certain thing is happening in the market where you can enlighten and educate even your shareholders through it.
Actually, we were discussing this a few days ago. We were actually discussing the fact that international investor would also need not just the side from the company, they would need more information about the industry itself. So where it's heading and the clarity about the strategic positioning of such an industry is very important for investors to make such a decision. Therefore, it's important also from the investor relation point of view, just not to highlight definitely what the company are doing and the business model and how they are operate. They definitely need to have a clarity about the industry itself. So clarity about the industry would therefore give a great, let's say, attraction for investors to be part of it.
Mohamed, what's the most effective way to increase the foreign investors in your company?
I think you need to really give me the tricky questions. Look, basically, again, what you need to do is do your job, and the appetite will come. This is how can I see it. Because again, driving a certain level of institutional or even international investors within your portfolio, that could be driven by first thing, which is identification of your shareholders. You need to understand who's owning your share. That could create a good direction or a good strategy for the company to understand what we need to do. Because again, creating the identification or to understand who's owning the share could build a good strategy according to the appetite that you are interested to have it within your shareholders. Creating your job in a very proper way that eventually will drive, regardless if it's international or local, the good work will pay out. For me, I'm not considered with the share price. I'm not considered with, but I will be more considered with the macro economics to make sure that I'm in line with what's happening on the ground. I need to be all the time connected and updated with the macroeconomics update that really could impact my business. I need to give some sweetener to my investors about it if they are international. I need to make sure that they really attending my earnings call. I need to make sure that all of their questions has been answered properly. I need to make sure that they see the picture from the angle. How can I see it? I need to give them the right pulse of the business and how it goes. I think if I build all of that building blocks, the appetite will come. It's not about one port or only international or only local.
So last part, I would like to talk about ESG. The kingdom has taken many steps towards ESG with the ambitious target to achieve a net zero emission by 2060. Saudi Exchange, Tadawul, become a partner supporting the UN's Sustainable Stock Exchange in 2018. What ESG performance indicator do you consider essential in your sector in terms of return on investment?
For us, it's very unique because each business, when you understand the concept of the ESG and the parameters and so forth. For us, we worked internally first, where we identified a clear framework of parameters, where this parameters connects our core business, our core values, and how does that connect with ESG requirements and the parameters of sustainability. And we built based upon that, where we start connecting the dots in order to make sure, okay, if we're doing all of this and this business and in line with the ESG requirements, then how will that be reflected as well? Because at the end of the day, yes, you can do all of this, but a lot of it has to become public and has to be known. So that's why publishing it in our board report, our framework of sustainability, connecting it to the ESG frameworks and so forth, gave a lot of clarity for a number of stakeholders, of shareholders, credit rating agencies, even sustainability and ESG evaluators who work to provide to buy sides as well ESG evaluation frameworks and so forth. So a lot of it has to be publicized, and creating that framework provides more clarity for all the shareholders to understand that ESG. So we took those parameters and we interpret them internally and reconnected them within a framework.
Mohammed, do you have the same understanding of the relevant ESG criteria?
Look, for ESG, it's basically easy said than done, because again, you need to make sure that the alignment coming from top going into the lowest level within your company, because adoption of ESG, again, according to the sector, you need to make sure that you understand what's really important for your sector in order to adopt it very well. And that has to be promoted by the board, and that has to be cascaded down and translated into policies and procedures that needs to be implemented effectively within the organization. So it's a big journey, but it has to come, as I told you, top to down direction. The most important thing I can see it, I will talk within the regulatory framework that we are operating, is basically the regulator is doing his best to identify what's important, because this has to be aligned with the country direction from a sustainability standpoint, and even to be aligned with the international standards and the initiatives as well. So this is how can I see it. For us, I can see that we are in the midway. We are in a midway to reach a good level of ESG. There is all the time lag between what's happening in the region and what happened in the developed markets. So that the momentum about the ESG and the focus about the ESG rating and this stuff will eventually come to have it here in the region and even in the country. in a very identified way according to the regional and the country situation.
Fahad, do you think there's any kind of obstacle to apply ESG?
Well, again, I think having like a previous experience and some struggle to apply such factors of ESG, I believe that companies must start as a start point to have to factor their values as a ESG in order for them to have it as a start point. Therefore, it would be easier for them to understand the bigger picture. It's not only the regulatory framework, also the regulator for each company with, for example, Maharah is under whatever regulator there. The regulator have their own factors that you must consider in order for you, which might contradict with the ESG framework. And we discussed this last time about some point that cannot be used as a factors, and it will be struggle for a company to apply it as a parameter.
Adding to what my colleague said, I think the challenges in ESG adoption is somehow internal challenges. It's not about external challenges, because again, maybe everyone is talking ESG, but no one is adopting the ESG. We need to shift from just talking to walking the talk. This is something very important. Maybe the other challenge, as I told you, which is setting the culture itself. To have an ESG in a proper way, you need to have it as a part of the DNA of the company, because again, believe me or not, that will really pay out. If you work it very well, it will really drive a good sustainability for your business. Other thing is maintaining, or this could be also a challenge, and specifically for the big companies, maintaining a successful partnerships that promotes the ESG, because again, as a corporate, we cannot fix the ESG alone on our own. We need to make sure that our partners are having the same concepts, the stakeholders, employees, environment, and even suppliers and agents and everyone really partner in that to deliver. Because again, you cannot assess your ESG. There is no daily matrix you can have it to assess your development in the ESG. In order to have it, I think all of the stakeholders, they need to work very efficient.
I think we're exceeding the time with the discussion panel. It went so fast. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, our distinguished speaker will be around. If you have any question, just please say hi and ask them. Thank you so much.